Is back into it in Chester. Here's El Senior. Yes! Yes! The center back, Jacob Glesnes, is going for it. Oh my God! What a goal! And that will do it! One of the best comebacks in recent years. 3 unanswered by the Union. And they go into the Gold Cup break, winning it 3-2.
Hello, welcome to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd. Well, it's that time of the week again. Another week, another match preview with the Philadelphia Union taking on DC United this Sunday. I'm joined by a guy who might be arguably the busiest man involved with DC sports. He is a Towson Tiger alumni, the current play-by-play voice for DC United and the Washington Wizards, as well as the sporting director for WTOP. He is Mr. Dave Johnson. Dave, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here with me today.
Hey, listen, thanks for the time. I'm always looking for a good excuse to talk soccer for a while. When I got the message from you and you wanted to talk some soccer, bring me on because once you wind me up in the subject soccer, I love it. I love the time, and I appreciate your support and passion. And as somebody who has been in this soccer game for a long time, I sincerely appreciate that, because I remember once upon a time when you couldn't get information and you didn't have people like yourself that were taking the time and commitment to help promote this wonderful game. So it's sincerely appreciated.
Hey, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys, all the commentators that I get on, and now I have another team that I can check off my list with yourself. Like I said, DC United. So one by one, commentator for each team is getting checked off, and all of you guys do such a great work. You're great ambassadors for this game, and it's always a pleasure when I get to talk to you guys, and especially, like I said, you're a Towson Tiger alumni, so anybody that's involved with Maryland soccer, they went to a Maryland college, because what my listeners know, what you probably don't know, I live in Maryland, born and raised in Maryland. I'm not a DC United fan. I'm a Philadelphia Union fan, and so whenever I get to talk just with anybody involved with soccer in Maryland, it's always a pleasure. So really, really excited, like I said, Dave, to have you on here. And it is funny because I can't remember watching DC United games, hearing your voice call the games, because I believe you've been calling DC United games since 1996. So you've been
day one, yep.
Yeah, you've been with United since day one. So I can remember just flipping the channels, hearing your voice, and now I get to talk to you. So yeah, this is definitely a great honor. But for people who don't know who Dave Johnson is, how you got started with DC United, can you go ahead and give people a rundown?
Well, I grew up as a fan of the North American Soccer League. I mean, I'm part of the Pele generation. I'm not, afraid to say I'm 57 years old. So I'm an old guy. So I hope that doesn't put all your listeners off. But so as I grew up, soccer was very much just coming of age. And I say the Pele generation because Pele came to this country in 1975 and joined the New York Cosmos, and suddenly there was this explosion of youth soccer leagues, and I played youth soccer and got involved in the sport and became a fan of the North American Soccer League, which, looking back now, what I didn't realize then was just how good a league that was, and the talent beyond Pele that was on display. And it's funny what you remember in life after all these years. I vividly remember the excitement in 1978 of watching a Washington Diplomats game on television, because now keep in mind, everything, we're maybe on television, we're going to be on YouTube, God knows where this podcast is going, so everything is caught on video. But back in 1978, boy, if you could see your team on television, it was a big deal. And the Washington Diplomats were playing the Philadelphia Fury, and I can still remember the commentators talking about, they got a crowd of like 18,000 at Veterans Stadium, and how they were excited to have soccer back. Now, I was too young at that point. I was like 14, I guess, and they were talking about the great success story they had in Philadelphia. Now, I didn't realize this, but this was the Atoms, obviously. But in 1978, I'm 14. I wasn't following the Philadelphia Atoms or the NASL when I was 7 years old or whatever. So that's a little Philadelphia connection aside. But the bottom line is, I just fell in love with the sport. I fell in love with the team in Washington, the Washington Diplomats, that had Johan Cruyff. And I always wanted it to be part of my career. I always wanted to be in broadcasting. I wanted soccer to be a part of that. As I graduated from, and let me correct you, it was Towson State then. Now it's just Towson. I'm not correct. I'm just having some fun with it, because all of us that went to Towson State are still saying, hey, we were a state school and we know it. But when I graduated in 1986, there really weren't many soccer options. Leagues had folded and that type of thing. So it was a different period of time, but I was able to stay in the sport because in the late 80s we did get the American Soccer League, American Professional Soccer League started. I remember covering Maryland Bay's games with the Penn Jersey Spirit that played in Trenton. Now I know I put every listener to sleep. I did the Major Indoor Soccer League with the Baltimore Blast.
Yes.
And on and on and on. So bottom line, I've been doing it a long time. I love the sport, and I love each day with the sport. I'm looking forward to this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. So am I. And I'm glad you brought up the Washington Diplomats because you said Johan Cruyff. So funny enough, we have a family friend who used to play for the Diplomats, Sonny Askew, number 17 for the Diplomats, and still keep in contact with Sonny. So I've heard all the stories about Coach Gordon Bradley that he's told me, what he's wanted to share, I should say. And yeah, I mean, you talk about a great league back in the day. I've heard all the stories from Sonny Askew and what a player he was for the Diplomats, what a player that he was able to play with just so many great players for the Diplomats and against. And like you say, Pele with the New York Cosmos, we were blessed early on with some great soccer in the United States.
And the thing about Sonny Askew, I can still vividly remember in 1979 him scoring a goal for the Vancouver Whitecaps against the Vancouver Whitecaps. There was a big goal, it was a game-winning goal, and I can still remember racing home on the Metro subway and watching 11 o'clock news, and he was interviewed. I mean, he was an amazing story. I mean, people have to understand players like a Sonny Askew are playing in the 70s against these teams that were filled with European and South American stars, and they typically just had in some cases, token Americans, if you will, who didn't get a lot of playing time. They were just on the roster. But Sonny was a good player, and Gordon Bradley was one of the ones that helped keep soccer alive in this country. I'm not exaggerating that. He was, along with Clive Toye, helped get Pele to this country. He was my first broadcast partner on DC United games, and we could fill up a podcast that will go till midnight with stories with Gordon. But anyway, it's a special time. But what fans do need to know and appreciate, and I think it is important, and that's why, and again, an aside, I'm glad the Columbus Crew are keeping their name because we need to understand we have a tradition. We didn't just start in 1996, and we need to celebrate that tradition. And it, again, what is building in Philadelphia has always been a great soccer town. The Philadelphia Textile used to be a great university there, and college soccer. We had Davey McWilliams play with the Baltimore Blast, and great stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, see, look, I love doing Philadelphia Union Soccer podcast, but man, there's a lot of history in Maryland soccer. And like you said, we could be here talking hours, just different stories about people connected with soccer in Maryland. But let's go ahead and talk about DC United a little bit. And so as the listeners know, as any DC United supporters know that are listening to this podcast, DC United took on Orlando City over the weekend and lost that game 0-1. And statistically, DC United led in every single pointing category, minus the goals department. And I saw on social media that Pablo Maurer tweeted out Losada's quotes after the game. He said, "There's one way to lose. This is the way to dominate the game. They didn't want to play after they scored the goal. Every weekend we are improving. If you're going to lose at home, it has to be fighting until the very last second to win this game." So how much are you buying into that quote? And do things seem like they're improving for DC United?
Yeah, well, I think Hernán Losada is a great story. Obviously, he led his, and I don't pretend to know him well because he obviously just arrived at the club. But it's hard not to, when you spend any time with him just via Zoom, which is what we're doing now, to not get caught up in his infectious attitude, his passion for the game, his belief in how the game should be played. And he said from the start that this was going to be about building a culture, a foundation, a way of playing, an identity. It wasn't about getting that one result and then saying that was a victory. The victory will be the bigger picture, and that's what they're building to. So, no, he wants to win games, but what he was saying about the game against Orlando, this is the way we're going to play. We're not going to change. We're not going to adapt because okay, we're playing this team, so let's, put 10 guys behind the ball and play defensive this week, and we'll do this week. This is the style they're going to play. This is the style that he believes in. It's a high press style. It's a style that requires a lot of fitness. I mean, guys thought they were fit until he showed up in training camp, and then they discovered they weren't fit, and because he demands a higher level. But he's had a history in Belgium of being able to take clubs that aren't the big spending clubs. It's not the Anderlecht in Belgium, and have success and get promotion in Belgium and also succeed in the top division. So in Major League Soccer, there's several ways, or in any league, there's several ways to do it. Baseball, where you can talk about whatever sport you want to do. You can go out and get big name players and big name signings, and look, maybe that will be in DC United's future again. We had a guy named Wayne Rooney here for a year and a half, and it did bring some success. Not the success ultimately wanted. Ultimately you won a championship, but look at what Philadelphia's done. I mean, they're not going out and just throwing money all over the place, and yet they're one of the great stories in American soccer right now. So I think and Jim Curtin and everybody there is clearly built, and I'm not as close to it as you are, but from afar we're looking and so proud, and as they're in the Champions League, and believe me, that we take a lot of pride as American soccer fans to see a club like Philadelphia doing what it's doing. So Hernán Losada is trying to create that with DC United.
Yeah, absolutely. How would you assess his 6 games? I mean, you talked about his playing style. They typically play 3-5-2, and Jim Curtin in his press conference today had a lot of high praise for Losada. Said that they're a team that's going to fight for every single ball, that a team that's not going to give up until that final whistle's blown. That's kind of what Losada was saying in his quote. Jim Curtin also talked about how well organized DC United are, how really well they play with the 3 center backs out of the back, and Jim Curtin, I feel like, is not a coach that's just whoever the playing is not going to say nice things just to say nice things. No, I think Jim Curtin actually means what he says every time that he talks about a coach. When he said last week that New England was the best team they played in MLS, I think he had a point there. New England's playing some great soccer right now in MLS, and everybody thought Columbus was going to be up at the top, myself included. And yeah, they're struggling right now. Maybe that's because of CCL play, but for him to say so many great things about Losada, who's the youngest coach right now in MLS, who was unknown to so many people. I mean, Losada, I feel like, wasn't even on the list of names that we were seeing in the offseason floating around until it was announced that, hey, look, here's our head coach. So, like I said, how would you assess his 6 games so far?
Well, yeah, no, you're right. He was a surprise signing. So many names were bandied about, and let's face it, we didn't know. I don't pretend to follow every league in the world, so I wasn't following the Belgian league, and I had the Hernán Losada name, hit me out of the blue, and but then I just remember talking to a gentleman named Dave Casper, when you hear him speak and talk. You do get a sense I'm buying whatever he's selling. And that's, look, that's ultimately what a coach is doing. He's trying to get his players to buy into what he is selling. And he has a belief and a style and the way he wants to play. And right out of the gate, the home game against New York City FC was a bit of a example of how it can work. And it has worked. Quite frankly, they also had the win over Chicago. And look, it struck me when Orlando, and we talked about this in the broadcast, when they bring in another center back in the second half because they're up 1-0, and they want to decide, what, we better shore up our defense and try to get out of here with the 3 points. That kind of shocked us because the game's not over at that point, but yet they're taking a defensive stance. And so to me, that showed a level of respect for the way DC United's attacking. And again, DC United is not at full strength right now.
Yep.
And yet that level of respect already exists. So if you look at DC United's results, the loss to New England was an own goal. The Columbus, they had some own goal situation. So the only game that you really point to and you say, you know what, they got torn apart was San Jose. I mean, they had some defensive problems against San Jose, and the score reflects that. So I think the key is that they're clearly building a foundation. And in talking to the players, they are excited about the way they are playing. And so, look, we're talking in May. We're just getting started. Yep. And so it's important that you sense that vibe from the players who have gone through a tough training camp where fitness has been a priority. And you're not getting a sense here in May, they're thinking, boy, I can't wait till the season's over.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's so early on in the season. I know DC United, they've only scored 5 goals so far this season, conceded 10, but we played 6 games. And last season when we played 23 games, I think it was, DC only scored 25 goals. And so to have 5 goals in 6 games, yeah, I mean, that's almost a goal a game. But this team, you can tell that there is some very, very strong potential in the attack and defensively. I mean, Losada seems like he's a really, really promising coach nobody knew about, but he has a way he wants to play. It seems like the players are slowly but surely buying into it. And like you said, the key thing for DC United, and when I had Tyler Terrence on for Chicago Fire, the big thing for Chicago is they have a lot of players that are injured, and that's the same thing for DC United. And so to get 3 big points at home against New York City, to get points against Chicago early on in the season when so many teams are struggling, when you look at the end of the season, how big are those points going to be against New York City? How big are those points going to be against Chicago? They're going to be huge, and especially, like I said, with the injuries that DC United have, it could make or break them making it into the playoffs.
Yeah, no, and that's why, look, and again, as we talk about this high press and what they've learned from the San Jose game, that, okay, you continue with that press, but you have to be thinking about, your defensive responsibilities when you turn it over. That doesn't mean you change to a defensive style, but this high press system doesn't mean you just throw caution to the wind and let them go into your goals, because you do want to, as much as it is about creating identity and a culture, you also don't want to lose 10 games in a row or whatever that situation. So this is a league that should be great for fans, is great for fans, because anybody truly can do anything in this league. And timing, how you are come October, November often means more than how you are right now. But having said that, unless I'm thinking about Seattle, in their cup run a couple of years ago where they had a terrible first half and they recovered, but you can't, bank on that. When you're looking at playoff positioning, whether it's home field or whatever, you're going to think back, quite frankly, you're going to think back and think, oh, boy, if we could have just gotten a point out of that Orlando game, because they probably did deserve to get a point out of the Orlando game, and for no fault of their own. So each one of these games is important, just like this weekend is important to both Philadelphia and DC.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And before we talk about that game, just for Philadelphia Union fans that aren't aware of some of the new signings that DC United brought in, like we talked about, both teams, Philadelphia and DC, haven't splashed the cast this season to bring in superstars. I mean, you guys, some names that you brought in were defenders Brendan Hines and Antonio Alfaro, who have started every single game so far in the back line for DC United. They also went out and acquired forwards Nigel Robertha, I hope I'm saying that right, and Adrian Perez from LAFC, and Losada. He's went out with 3 different striking partners so far up top for DC United, and probably a big part of that is because health of the team right now. And look, he's brand new coach to the team, didn't bring in a whole lot of players. So he's trying to figure out what players fit his system, what players are going to be good enough for DC United going forward. So yes, it's about getting points right now, but it is also figuring out what's his best lineup with the players he has available right now.
Yeah, no, and part of it is health dictated. We just got Paul Ariola back. And that was critical for DC United, and as fans know, Paul Ariola is a very good midfielder that can play wing back, he can do whatever you ask him to do, and he does possess that work rate that's necessary to have success in Hernán Losada's system. But this is the beauty of the, he preaches the collective. I don't think Adrian Perez was on many radars. I mean, he had some time with LAFC, but he's earned start because of his commitment, and quite frankly, he's come close to scoring. And his, as I watch him play, he spent some time in indoor soccer with the Ontario Fury in the Major Arena Soccer League, and I see some indoor qualities in him that translate to the outdoor game. His ability to get out of tight spaces, and there's no situation that he can't deal with because of that experience. That's why I always say that futsal or indoor soccer is such a great, foundation for any outdoor soccer player as well. So, there's not a mega star striker that DC United is relying on. It is, and it's not cliche to say it's a collective situation. Brendan Hines-Ike, the defender you talked about, scored a goal that's worthy of. It's certainly his goal of the week, So, and he, Hernán Losada knew him from his time in Belgium. So, Nigel Robertha, we still have not seen, but everything we know from what we're told about it, he's a bona fide goal scorer, and they're anxious to get him on the field. But right now you've had Adrian Perez earning some starting time. Paul Ariola is coming back. The names may not jump off the sheet at fans, but there's some bite in this attack. And Edison Flores is a player they signed last year, but I felt bad for him because, you come to a new country from Mexico. He's a Peruvian international, was playing in Mexico. And then all of a sudden you play 2 games and there's a pandemic and a shutdown and you're dealing with injuries. And so his first year, we never really got to see what he was all about. But he's a crafty, clever, skilled player that can score a goal, can also play a beautiful ball. So they have some components that lead you to believe the goals are going to come for this team.
Absolutely. And I'm still like, I can't believe I didn't know that about Perez. So I wouldn't say I'm a huge indoor soccer fan, but obviously I know indoor soccer because how successful the Baltimore Blast have been. I mean, we could sit here and talk about the Blast, the San Diego Sockers, Milwaukee Wave, but we don't have the time. Maybe another time we can talk something like that. But I'm glad you brought up Edison Flores and Paul Ariola. I was hoping that Paul would get more time at Swansea City when they were making that push for the championship playoffs, and then he got sent back here to DC United, which DC United fans obviously aren't going to complain about because Paul Ariola has been such a crucial player over the years for them, and we've seen him play well for the national team. And then, like you said, Edison Flores, this was your big signing last season. Nobody knew COVID was going to happen. This is the guy who, okay, look, we lost Acosta, we lost Wayne Rooney. Well, we went out, spent money, and got Edison Flores. No, nobody knows who he is, but we believe in this guy. And like you said, he had a bad injury last season, COVID hit, and stop and start season. And it's like, don't give up on this guy yet, and I hope DC United fans aren't. And like you said, Philadelphia Union fans probably aren't going to know a lot of these players on this team. And I think if you ask fans around the league, they're not going to tell you who Sergio Santos is or Corey Burke. And it's the same thing with the Philadelphia Union. I think both of these teams are built so similar where they don't have that big superstar. The superstar is the team itself. And I think that's exactly what DC United are trying to build right now down in DC. But going on, talking about that DC United versus Philadelphia Union game this Sunday. In 27 regular season MLS games, the Union are 14-8-5 against DC United while scoring 50 goals and conceding 32. The Union are 4-5-5 away at DC. The Union last lost a game in DC in 2017, in which DC United won that game 2-1 thanks to goals from Ortiz and an Acosta penalty. Last season, these two teams played to a thrilling 2-2 game thanks to a Mark McKenzie late equalizer for the Union. And I think Union and fans and the players went down to DC thinking this is going to be a walk in the park. DC has nothing to play for, but they had everything to play for. And yeah, they probably weren't going to make the playoffs, but they wanted to ruin their Union season. So I think that's more than enough motivation for a team to play for. It's like, yeah, Philadelphia is having this great season. They're in the driver's seat to win the Supporters Shield. Yeah, let's go ahead, beat them. And at one point, it looked like DC United was going to take all 3 points. So, look, these teams, like I said, have played 27 times, a lot of history. Yeah, the Union lead the series, but the Union don't typically play well down in DC. And who knows what's going to happen? I'll give my predictions, I guess, here in a little bit, but just what do you want to see from DC United this game? Like I said, they lead the Union at home in the series at home, and last year they played to a 2-2 draw. So what do you want to see from DC this game?
Well, I don't think it's any secret that just don't concede early, and that's been the problem for DC United is that they believe that the Orlando script could have been different had they not conceded that early goal, because obviously Orlando realized okay, we're not going to play with DC United in the second half. We're going to shut this game down, and they did. And to their credit, they got the 3 points. But you look at their losses, they've been victimized. Well, even in the win over New York City, they conceded an early goal and had to show that fight to get the win 2-1. So it's important for DC United to be organized defensively from the start. Now, that means, no, they're still going to come out with their high press. They're still going to play the way they play, but they can't have that miscommunication, that slip up where they give up the early goal. That doesn't mean that if they gave up the early goal at Philadelphia, that Philadelphia is going to do what Orlando did. I don't necessarily expect that, but I think primarily that's important. And then I think it's it'll be interesting to see the lineup. And quite frankly, I don't know what it's going to be, because it's still players are coming back. And the exciting thing, and obviously you're seeing it as you're developing players in Philadelphia. Moses Nyman is such a player of high quality, and he's all of 17 years old. 18-year-old Kevin Paredes finally got back, on the field last week from injury, and I really believe that his ability to take people on 1v1, that was the way DC United was going to score, because what he was doing was putting pressure on the flank, and they were fouling him because they were having trouble dealing with him 1v1, and that was going to set up a set piece opportunity. And there were set piece opportunities DC United just didn't convert, including one which, boy, if Ola Kamara just could have gotten a knee on it, it could have been a 1-1 scoreline. So I think that's the other part. Excitement right now is you're like, all right, who's going to be in the starting 11? But you've gotten enough of a snapshot that and obviously Jim Curtin, said it best in the press conference. You know what you're going to get from an Hernán Losada team that they're going to come at you, and they're not going to sit back, and they're going to try to entertain. They're going to try to play, and they're going to be scrapping. And that's why an Adrian Perez is starting, or has been starting, because he does have the skill, but to play this kind of system, you have to have the want and desire to have that work rate where your engine just keeps going, because that's the only way you stay on the field with DC United right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at the last 3 games for DC United, they had 13 shots against Orlando. They had 9 shots against Columbus, and then they had 12 shots against Chicago. And look, they're a team that seems like they're creating a lot of chances, kind of like the Union, but they're just not finishing their chances. And I say that every episode I have on somebody. I'm always like, for my keys of the game, the Union have to finish their chances. They have to finish their chances. And look, it's a lot more harder than it is for us just to say here, finish your chances. Because look, so much goes in the moment in the game. A player could put you off so easily, and you hit the ball. And so, obviously I'm going to say that again this week for one of my keys to a victory for the Union. You got to finish your chances. And the one thing that Jim Curtin's been talking about, and he talked about a lot in his press conference today with journalists, he said, we need smarter decision-making around the box. And we saw that against New York Red Bulls, where the players would take too many passes, too many touches, or Corey Burke had a wide-open Ali Bedoya, didn't see him, and took the shot from about 25 yards out, and Ali Bedoya is giving it to him, saying, look, I was in on goal, you should have passed it to me. So it's just these little things. So hopefully the Union can make smarter decisions around the box against DC United. And then 3, I think, how can the Union deal with the wingbacks? Gressel's great out there on the right. We know him from his years with Atlanta United. We've not seen him at his best with DC United, I don't think. And we know that he's a talented player. So how can they deal with him on the left wing back side? Yeah, who knows? I think Losada has thrown out 2 or 3 different left wing backs. So who knows what we'll get over there. But I definitely think Julian Gressel is going to get the start. He's a great player. For the lineup, anybody that's a DC United fan, it is interesting because Jim Curtin, when we saw him sub on Kasper Schmeichel, who is a striker, Jim Curtin put him at the number 10 position. And I remember in 2019, Jim was telling reporters, this is something we mess with in practice. Kasper is good enough to play the number 10. And so, sure enough, for the first time ever, we saw Kasper play the number 10 when he got subbed on against New York Red Bulls. And Jim's like, this is something that he wants to do. This is something that we continue to work on in practice. And because he's saying that, is he trying to throw off DC United? Like, look, we're working on this. Like, prepare for this lineup. I don't know, because I said the same thing with Tyler Terrans. With Roberto Abramowitz with New York City. I forget what Jim Curtin was talking about, and I was like, is it a smoke screen? Is it not? I was like, I don't think so. And so I think Jim Curtin is seriously thinking about playing Kasper Schmeichel in the 10 position. So I can't say for sure who's going to play the 10 or the strikers, because if Kasper plays the 10, then that means Sergio Santos or Corey Burke's both going to be starting up top. And for DC United fans that aren't familiar, the Union play a 4-4-2 diamond formation. So, it is. Same here. Hard for me to predict what the lineup's going to look like. We get Jose Martinez back from suspension, our regular number 6. Leon Flock's been filling in nicely there. So, it is hard for me this week to figure out what Jim Curtin's going to do until we see that lineup out there. But like I said, the Union are 4-5-5 away at DC. DC lost that game 1-0, and Orlando City basically parked the bus after they got that first goal. Both these teams, look, if the Union score a goal early on, which they don't normally do, you're right. They're not going to sit back and just let DC come. No, they're going to continue to attack, try to hit DC on the counterattack. So because of that, I'm going to say a 1-1 draw between these two teams.
Well, yeah, no. Am I supposed to predict the score here?
You don't have to. If you want to, you can. Some commentators do, some don't.
I was thinking 1-1. I tell you what's tough. I'll say, last year obviously 2-2, but look, that was last year, and that was that's different teams and et cetera. But one thing I do believe it's going to be a very entertaining game. I do believe that, and I do believe, and I do know the motivation is high for DC United because this is the end of their 3-game homestand, and it is very much on the players' mind. It's been it's spoken so much about that they really want to play their best at home, and they believe they showed that against Chicago. They believe they showed that against Orlando, and they want to build on that and get the full 3 points against Philadelphia. So I don't know if I know a score line. But I do know that it's going to be an entertaining game on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know every time I say bad news for Union fans, I was like, why do you say that? Like, I thought I was talking to fans before the New York Red Bull game, and I'm like, the Union are coming off of 2 days rest. New York Red Bulls have a week. I think the Union are going to lose this game. And hey, look, I was happy to be wrong, and I'll be happy to be wrong if the Union win this game. But hey, it's been a blast having you on this podcast, Dave. Like we said, we could talk about Maryland soccer forever. And for people that aren't following you on social media, where can they find you?
At Dave J Sports, if you want to connect. I always love to connect with soccer fans all over the place. And again, I'm so proud of what the folks in Philadelphia have done at Subaru Park and the Sons of Ben and the supporters there. And I think about games I've come up there as a fan, and it is just a spectacular place to enjoy a great game of soccer. The All-Star game I remember in 2012 or somewhere in there. It just was. It's so great to have Philadelphia is part of our soccer landscape, and Pennsylvania, are they producing soccer talent? And that's also something to shout about.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I know we're coming up here on 31 minutes, right? And that's the one thing that I hate. Listening to sports radio in Baltimore here religiously, 105.7 The Fan. They're the home of the Maryland Terrapins, and they're not talking about Zach Steffen in the Champions League final. He's not starting. He has the chance to be he is the first Maryland Terrapin ever in a European final. He has a chance to, he's not starting, but to win this. And it's like, okay, he's not starting, but he played great college soccer at the University of Maryland. Like, at least give him a shout or talk about what Coach Sasha has been able to build down in Maryland. Look, look, like I said, we could talk so much about Maryland soccer because we have a lot to be proud of here. But like you said, Pennsylvania as well. Zach Steffen is from Pennsylvania. Christian Pulisic. Look, one of these players that are going to win the Champions League were born in Pennsylvania. How crazy is that? An American.
No, and Zach Steffen was in goal for the League Cup, their Manchester City's League Cup win. So, he's very much a part of Manchester City. And again, this is why we keep hearing about these players playing, Weston McKennie and Juventus and Italy. We go right down the list of why people have said for years that one day the United States will win the World Cup. We have too much talent, or we should have too much talent, because of the size of our country, the depth and breadth and diversity. I think this is an amazingly exciting time for men's soccer as well. And obviously, we continue to celebrate the women's success, but there was so much disappointment of not qualifying for the last World Cup. But so many times in history, you've seen its darkest before the dawn, where a team that doesn't qualify for one World Cup and then suddenly it has a golden age. And I think we're starting to come into that in the United States.
Absolutely. And we're counting down the days to the 2022 World Cup, and then especially the 2026. So I hope DC gets the World Cup down there. I don't think Baltimore is going to get it. DC is a lot bigger. And so if DC gets it, definitely going down to DC to watch whoever plays. I don't care who it is. And this golden generation the Americans are producing, it's looking really, really promising. But for any listeners that aren't following the podcast on social media, follow @FreeKickPod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Check out the website, thefreekickpodcast.com, and wherever you get your podcast, The Free Kick, Todd Lewis. And like I said, Dave, it's been a blast having you on the podcast. Good luck on the call against the Pacers. Hopefully you have some playoff basketball to call after the Wizards beat the Pacers, right?
Yeah, we'll look forward to that. And a good choice of words. And it was a blast to be together, because Blast was a team I did call for 2 years in the early 90s. So thank you for having me on tonight.
No problem, Dave. And with that said, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.